Welcome to the Dr. DigiPol Show. This is Alan Rosenblatt, aka Dr. DigiPol, and we're here for another episode of some interesting talk about the intersection of digital and politics. I am very excited to have with me today my guest, Micah Sifry. Micah is here up on screen. Welcome. And just a real pioneer in the space, a longtime journalist, but really broke through interesting ground on digital politics early on with TechPresident, which was this fantastic blog that I contributed to back in 2007, really through, I guess, 2000. What year did that last?
Well, we president going until about 2015.
2015, but made some big impacts in the 2008 election and in the 2012 election.
Mm-hmm.
And then you created Personal Democracy Forum as well, which continues on to have this fascinating annual conference in the United States, in New York City, but also you've done several in Europe. I remember the one in Budapest, hearing great stories about that one. And most recent venture, which I guess is sort of the evolution of this process, is Civic Hall in New York City, and that's sort of our starting point to talk today. So welcome, Micah, to the Dr. DigiPol Show, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Civic Hall.
Sure. So thanks for that great introduction, Alan, and fun to be on the show with you. Civic Hall is a 2-year-old collaborative community center in the heart of Manhattan that's devoted to civic tech, or what we think of as the use of technology for the public good. And it's an experiment. It's done way better than we expected for only being 2 years old. But we're still figuring out what the whole model is. But the core idea is that the sort of people who we've been gathering every year for Personal Democracy Forum, our annual big conference on the ways that tech is enabling change in the political arena, in how government works, and in how people engage in civic life, that people wanted a place where they could get together on a daily basis, and not just 2 days out of the year, and that furthermore, there were enough people as individuals and also organizations with a reason to get together on a regular basis. When we started out, we didn't know if that idea would have legs. There are lots of places, not just in New York, in many, many cities, that rent out desks to people who are kind of freelance or small-scale entrepreneurs, people with startups, people with nonprofits. Conventionally, these are co-working spaces. We knew there were a lot of those, and that this was not aimed to just be another co-working space. In fact, what we knew from the beginning is that there were a lot of people in those kinds of spaces working on projects that had a big public good component, that really not about making a lot of money, but about having a big positive impact on people around the world. That there were a lot of those kinds of people who were feeling isolated, disconnected, and in need of something where they felt more community. So that was the initial spawning idea for Civic Hall, was that just creating a great daily hub for people to work and network side by side was a need that we thought that there's a genuine value that we can provide here that people would actually pay for, the same way they might pay to sit in a coffee shop or sit at a co-working place. But instead, here they're sitting in a community of like-minded and very diverse, innovative people. The second thing that we had a hunch about, and that we think is still a work in process, is that people also are hungry for better ways to collaborate across their field or across disciplines. That many of us are stuck in jobs that feel very siloed, that don't, where you're just talking to other people like you, and that real problem solving flows from bumping into people with different points of view, with different life experiences, who come from different places in the larger public ecosystem. That means people from the public sector, people from the private sector, people who run nonprofit organizations or community organizations, the free agent entrepreneurs who are starting things, the people who you're trying to benefit. That mixing, creating a place where all of those kinds of people can mix on a regular basis, that itself also has a value, and that it could also fill a gap in functionally in terms of what's available for people who want to work collaboratively on solving hard public problems. Right now, there are really only two models for that. What we have are hackathons. This is something that's been going on now for probably more than a decade. Somebody will call a contest, invite coders and designers to come in and work on that problem. Typically, it's a day or over a weekend. Maybe there's some prize money involved. Maybe there's some free pizza and beer involved. But it's very rare that hackathons actually produce working solutions to problems that then really get used. You'll often hear about somebody invented an app and they won a prize, but you rarely hear about that thing taking off and really becoming a significant change in how people live. So we think that hackathons have very limited value as a result. The only other model that our field has had for a long time now are what are called incubators or accelerators. And these are places, typically they're run on a for-profit basis. Sometimes they're run also for nonprofit organizations. But these are places that you apply to get into when you have a team of people who are all really focused on just trying to build a product into a successful company, or get something accelerated where they raise more money, where they get connections that advance this business idea, and that incubators are very structured. There's a good model for how to make them work that has been replicated all over the place. But there's got to be something in between those two things, right?
Right.
If you're not in that mode of where I'm just for myself and I'm just building something that needs to be incubated and accelerated, and you want to be doing more than just going to a hackathon for a day and feeling like you really didn't accomplish anything. So that functionally, we also understood that there needed to be a place for ongoing collaboration, and that what we built in creating Civic Hall was not just a place for individuals to work and do some sort of serendipitous connecting with each other, and a lot of that happens, but also a place where, because of our staff, because of our ability to see across the whole room, as it were, where connections need to be made, because of our ability to also pull in resources from larger institutions, foundations, government, and the like, that it might be possible to tackle some bigger problems. And that, in many ways, the weakness of civic tech up till now has been the inability to kind of see the larger picture, and that you get lots of sort of small-scale efforts that, little things that try and chop off a little piece of a problem and start solving it, and a difficulty scaling up to a level where, you can say something's really impacting the lives of lots and lots of people.
That makes a lot of sense. And
I'll stop there.
Sure,
a lot
sure.
of explaining I mean, there are more moving pieces to it, but those are the core ideas at work.
And I really like the idea of, a themed place where people get together, but that the management staff have expertise in the same space.
Right.
This is kind of the theme of this show. The idea that we don't just bring in people who are experts in digital politics and they're interviewed by a reporter. I mean, I work in the space too. So the idea is to take it to the next level. So it's you get beyond the sort of the basic questions.
But I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that I think is uniquely possible in a place like Civic Hall. I'm sure this sort of thing happens all the time in co-working spaces. It's going to happen naturally as people network with each other. But we had a member, an Army veteran, who joined about 2 years ago, a woman named Kristen Rouse, came in on a scholarship, actually. We have some funding from Craig Newmark of Craigslist, specifically to support people who are veterans or family of veterans. And Kristen had this idea as a relatively young veteran of one of our more recent, that there was a gap in the veterans world, that the veterans of foreign war, VFWs, that they're mostly an older constituency, and that while there were some national organizations focused on the needs of Iraq and Afghanistan vets, there was nothing just in New York City. And New York City is, 8 million people. I think she said there's maybe as many as 100 to 200,000 recent vets in New York. And that the city, which prides itself on actually providing lots of valuable services to all kinds of communities that are in need, did not have a program out of city government focused on veteran services. So Kristen had this nucleus of an idea that there ought to be a Department of Veteran Services specifically focused on the needs of helping these younger veterans in New York. And she needed to build an organization to get that going. She came into Civic Hall with a little more than an idea. As she tells it, one of the first things that happened for her is that she just started talking to other people in the space and explained that, I'm building a membership organization. I know I should use the internet. How should I do that? What tool should I use? And somebody, sat her down and explained to her, well, here are your options. Why don't you use Nation Builder? It's a very cheap tool that's designed for exactly this kind of thing, building a membership community. And so they showed her how to do that. She started using it. She now builds the thing up to the point where, they have a very rich calendar of events. They've got a couple hundred dues-paying members. It's beginning to feel like they have the capacity to start lobbying City Council to actually pass this bill into law, creating a new Department of Veteran Services. And again, she knows that she needs to do leadership development. She needs her members to become good advocates, to be able to go meet with their own member of the City Council and explain why this is needed. So she knows she needs leadership training. And she needs some kind of module for being able to do that, and she wants to provide some of it online. Next thing you know, she partners up with another member in our space who runs an organization that has as its focus training women, recruiting and training women to run for office. It's called Vote Run Lead. And Erin Velarde, the head of Vote Run Lead, says to Kristen Rouse, the head of the Veterans Alliance, I can work with you. I can show you how we do leadership training. And they end up partnering on the training of Kristen's putative leaders. And long story short, they go out and they do the hard work of lobbying to convince the City Council to create this new department. It took 8 months. It was signed into law. They have in their first year already a budget of $3 million. They're building some dynamic new services aimed at New York City vets. And Kristen, we actually gave her an award at the end of the year. We always try to highlight some of our members who have been really successful at something. And when she got up to take her award, she gave us a little window into what had happened for her. And she said, if I weren't at Civic Hall, I don't think I would have ever gotten this far, this fast. And she said, Civic Hall got me out of my living room and out of my pajamas. And I think that was a really important insight, that for a lot of people, most of us have the capacity to address a problem, or we feel like the need to do something, but we don't know all the things that we need to do in order to be effective organizers. And technology, I have to say, I don't want to make a fetish of technology. It is not just, like using a laptop or using a fancy webcasting software or knowing how to use social media. Technology is just another word for the knowledge of how to get something done,
Right.
right? It's a tool. The wheel is a technology.
Yes.
Knowing how to train somebody is a form of technology.
Right.
And our society has now given the word technology a whole different gloss, and which certainly it's true. We have some very powerful new technologies that can sometimes speed things up or make you stronger than you otherwise might be. That's all great. But the core of this is still about the people understanding how to do things. And
Yeah.
that really at the heart of this Civic Hall is about a renewal of people's civic ability to do things, whether it's on their own or with others, in order to address some pressing public problem. That's really the essence of it. It is not about whether you are, some kind of genius coder. Not at all.
Right. 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 So I noticed you had in your was it the morning brunch or what your
First
daily
note?
digest
Yeah.
of
Uh-huh.
stories.
Hmm.
First News. You picked up on a story that I came across this morning in the Wall Street Journal about civic-based tech seeing a surge, and they get
Right.
into uh, Accountable and some other technology apps that are designed to help citizens engage government along the lines of what you just described. Was it Christie? You said her name was. Um,
Christian Rouse. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes. Along that line, and of course, they're using fancy technology on mobile phone to do this advocacy. And the article talks about how there's been this huge surge in the use of these apps. But to your point about, well, it's not just about the technology, my mind started thinking, well, is it a huge surge in engagement of citizens reaching out to government? Or is it just a shift from how some people may have done it with email before, and now they're doing it with apps? Because we've also seen a huge shift in more people turning out to protest offline in the
Yeah.
streets, in the airports.
Sure. Well, I think all of this is the same thing. I mean, it's we're living through an unusual moment in American history. We obviously the election was uh, a big shock to the system and to lots and lots of people.
Right.
Some of them are very happy with the results. Some of them are not at all happy with the results. And it's the nature of our political process that lots of people uh, decide, okay, now I want to do something because of the events that they're dealing with. There was a big response after Obama was elected. For many people on the right, it was a shock
Right.
to them. We saw the rise of the Tea Party in the months after his election, and at least initially, that was very much an organic thing. It wasn't paid for by, the Koch brothers. That later they did invest in supporting it. But initially, it was just people deciding they were not happy and using their rights as citizens um, to petition for redress of grievances, as it says in the
Right.
Constitution. Um, I
That
do
fifth
think that
element of the First Amendment that people always forget.
yeah. So I do think that what's different about now compared to prior periods like this is just the fact that uh, so many more people are online, are socially connected in some way through things like Facebook. I believe the latest numbers for people using some kind of social network platform are close to 80% of adult Americans. So
Mhm.
there are pockets of where people are not still getting online as much. Some in rural areas, somewhat in poorer communities where access to high-speed internet is still too expensive for people or not available. But for the most part, we have I mean, compared to even 8 years ago, right? When I think we were just tipping over 50% usage of social networking tools. 80% is, you're edging up to almost saturation. And so I think that, what we know is that the internet is an accelerator.
Right.
It makes it easier to do certain kinds of connecting and communicating a lot faster. And so when so many people have this newly felt need to get involved, I'm not at all surprised that a lot of them are jumping in and using tools like, the ones you were mentioning. Most people, most of the time in America, are not that politically engaged. And we could spend probably more than an hour talking about why. There are lots of reasons that contribute to that. Historically, civic engagement in America has probably been in decline for more than a century. There was a brief period during the New Deal when there was an increase in things like participating in elections, but certainly since television became mass entertainment for people beginning of the 1960s, and suburbanization, breaking up a lot of the sort of face-to-face community engagement that people used to participate in. And then finally, organizations used to be the things that connected people up to, the system, as it were, that a lot of those things have atrophied. And so you and I have grown up in a time where, there's still a lot of political noise and a lot of lobbying and a lot of people trying to influence the process, but most of it, until recently, was done by professionals. And, the rest of us were mostly just asked to write it. If you supported Planned Parenthood, write them a check. If you support the ACLU, write them a check. And then the professionals will take care of pushing, whatever the general concerns of those people are. I'd say in the last 10, 12 years, that's begun to change as it's become easier to get involved. That the internet is enabling all kinds of lower barriers to participation. And so for some people, it's as easy as just clicking and you sign a petition, or typing a few words and you've made a comment on a piece of legislation or potential regulation. So we've seen an explosion of participation. And now that there are millions of people who are upset about the election, that they want to be able to influence the process, I'm not surprised that a lot of them are picking up and using these tools. The demand is there.
Right.
This is one of those rare moments where, usually if you're in the good government business of like trying to get people more involved in the process, you're like pulling teeth. Most people view it as a painful thing to do, to be involved politically, because it feels like it's a process where it's very hard to have a meaningful impact. It is hard. It shouldn't be that easy, by the way. It ought to be a little bit hard.
Put some thought into it.
Yeah, not just thought, work, right? Like I don't want to live in a democracy where all you have to do is push a button, and then somehow that's made into a law. That could be extremely dangerous.
Right.
You want there to
That
be,
does raise.
but
That raises.
it's been
Go ahead.
that people, I think, there's more demand for meaningful things to do than there is supply, and it's usually the other way around, where we're begging people to come in and help. Now they're begging to be given things to do.
So you talked about sort of the early days of the country where civic participation was much higher, and that we've been seeing a decline until these last 10, 12 years. But one thing that struck me is that before computer technology, in the early days when there was civic participation, it was not just people talking to the government, but they were talking to each other as they were talking to the government. They were out in force together. And I know that some of the protests that we're seeing now, that's starting to happen again. But looking at some of the civic tech that's been developed, I know a lot of it is how to send messages to Congress, but have you seen some good examples where built into these systems, there's the ability to talk to other activists, other citizens as you're organizing?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's actually one of the interesting opportunities at the moment, because there's so many people in motion, and a lot of them are creating and joining groups that frequently are based locally in their own communities as opposed to joining a national group. Um, they are getting involved in much more direct ways. Um, I mean, in the last 2 months, I think we've seen somewhere in the range of 10 to 15,000 new local groups started. Um, Maybe close to half of those are under the banner of Indivisible, which literally just started as a Google Doc, a guide written by some congressional staffers, um, offering a strategy for people who are desperate to have a strategy of like, how do we stop this, right? And the Indivisible guide gave um, grassroots Democrats in particular a plausible trying to halt or at least slow down some of the things that the Trump administration was promising to do. And it was modeled on the Tea Party approach of going after, district by district, your local representatives. They are actually very much going to listen to what constituents in their district have to say. So if people got themselves organized by district, they could at least have a bigger impact. That, I think, is a pretty good and effective model for a certain amount of impact and power, and it made a lot of sense to a lot of people. That to the point where hundreds of thousands of them have joined, in one of these local groups. I'm personally involved in helping with one that is centered on the city near where I live, which is in Yonkers in Westchester, New York. We went from a meeting of 50 people on January 7th in the middle of a snowstorm to I guess 3 general meetings later, we put on a town hall meeting with our congressmen
Wow.
with about 800 people, and our email list is now more than 1,000. And new people keep coming, which is the other thing that is really interesting is, if you've ever done political organizing, you know that there are always the diehards. There's always a few
Right.
people who are like, they look like they've been at every demonstration, going back to God knows how long, and they'll make sure to tell you about that. And they often do not have the abilities to actually organize something big and effective. They're good at reminding you of how politically astute they are, and they'll probably also pretty good at telling you why you're not actually as politically wise as they are. These are all reasons, if you catch my drift, why I think they're pretty bad organizers. But to be in a moment when new people keep showing up,
Yeah.
where word of mouth keeps bringing you people, is extremely rare.
It's truly
And
inspiring.
so I really want to be very clear about something, Alan. Technology is a piece of this story, but it is definitely not the whole story. I'm sure that the fact that, for example, that Indivisible got going and they wrote a really, really clear document that made a lot of sense to people at a moment when nothing was making sense, that was ingredient number one. And there's an old saying from our friend Seth Godin that ideas that spread win. So if you don't package your ideas in a way that make them really simple and clear so that they can spread, you have no chance of winning. So step one, Indivisible started with simple and clear. Step two, which I think was really, an act of genius on their part, is once they realized that thousands of people were coming to their document and downloading it, they put up a way for people to sign up. And they started collecting people's email addresses. And then the next thing they did is they said, if you're creating a group, enter your information here so that we can add you to our database and show other people that you exist. And they made
Strength in
it really
numbers.
easy. And they made it really easy for anybody, with a very light level of vetting to make sure that these were real groups and not scams. And then they made it very easy for anybody to search by zip code. So I am sure that part of the reason why our group has steadily grown, even without us doing a ton of legwork to, leaflet the neighborhoods kind of thing, is because people are finding us through this channel. They've heard of Indivisible, they think it makes sense, they go and they find their site, and then they put in a zip code. And if they live in our general area, they find us. And the next thing you know, they sign up to be on our email list. That is a great example of how the internet makes things easier, right?
Right.
The way it makes things more challenging is, imagine suddenly having a group where on the first meeting you have 50 people, and I'd say 80 to 90% of them know each other, because the first two people who organized the meeting invited all their friends. And a lot of them came, and maybe a few of them brought friends of friends, so that at that very first meeting, you're starting with a group of people who are like, hey, I know you from my synagogue, or I know you from church, or we belong to the same biking club, or we work at the same hospital. There's social capital. There's reasons for these people to trust each other and to get along with each other. But then imagine that at your first meeting after that, 200 people come, okay? And not all of them know each other. In fact, they don't know each other. That's by definition, they're new.
Right.
And then layer in the fact that a lot of these people now are joining our group on Facebook. And inside that Facebook group, anybody can write anything to anybody else. Okay? Now you're in a new environment, and it's a complicated one because we don't all know each other. And so somebody might say something that is less than productive, shall we say, to the goal of, growing the group or being effective or organizing things. And how do you manage that? That's the moment that I think a lot of these new organizations are in, is they're growing really fast. They're filled with people who want to be active and effective, and they're also banging into each other. They're also, with the best of intentions, colliding with each other's good intentions. Take a further step back to the world that we're all sitting in right now. I'm sure anybody listening to this show is probably like, I can't take how many emails I'm getting in my inbox asking me to sign this petition or donate here, or, that cumulatively we're living in a overabundance of possible action, and it's really hard to decide, what should I do? It's a paradox, right? The internet has actually made it too easy for us to get organized, and as a result, we're bumping into each other so much that it's confusing and to some degree debilitating. I know people who are like, I can't take it anymore. It's too much. I can't keep up. And this is a new kind of problem. It's kind of like an information overload problem. The other problem that we have is in that kind of an environment, being strategic gets harder, right? What's the strategic thing to do right now? Is it to run to the airports? Is it to donate money to the ACLU, raise money for Planned Parenthood? I mean, you can go on and on. And I think a lot of people may find that challenging, to be in such a complicated environment where there are many fires burning, and you want to figure out where's the best place that I should go to help out.
So, in a sense, what you're describing is a civic activism marketplace, And if we were to
it's sort of a marketplace, though. It's a lousy metaphor, but okay.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at is to explore, in the sense of, is there an equilibrium that we will find, or is there something about this that prevents an equilibrium from ever being? I mean, will we evolve into some sort of ordered behavior and structure because the market makes it happen, or is that simply a fantasy?
I don't really know. I mean, I that if past history is any guide, like if you look at uh, previous periods in American history when millions of people were in motion politically, like the civil rights period or the whole, the dramatic confrontations in the country over the Vietnam War. Um, I think the answer is that those are pretty chaotic periods. That there isn't an equilibrium. There isn't a settling. Oh, it gets into a stable pattern. That it vacillates a lot. One thing that has not happened yet, which I'm sure is going to happen, is that there are going to be external events that shock us. The same way in the 1960s, there were events that propelled things forward or caused things to stall. You can't anticipate those, you just live through them and then you adapt. So far, all we've had is an election. The world seems to have temporarily giving the United States a breather, right? Like we have yet to have some national incident or economic incident. But those things regularly take place and they alter the course of, what we pay attention to. So that's an element in the dynamic you can't even yet begin to figure out. I mean, I think a lot of people right now are assuming that the earthquake is over and we're in a new landscape, and in this new landscape, this is what you do, and the next big moment in the story will be 2018, right? We're going to have elections in 2018, and those elections will be really, really important. A lot of people will be involved. And I think, okay, that's one possible path, but there are other possible paths too, and we simply can't know. I didn't know on the morning of September 11th that that day was going to change history, right? It was just a nice sunny day.
Right.
So, that's the part about this that's very, disconcerting. I would say in the face of all of that, it's really good that lots and lots of people are getting involved locally. That I think in general, it's better that people feel connected to each other in real ways than isolated. I think that a lot of the capacity for a society become more authoritarian or fascist is when people are not connected up in community, when they are isolated, I mean, a mob is not a community. It's a different kind of beast.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that all of the current stuff that all these people getting together and getting to know each other as they work on projects with each other that may have some benefit in the short run, that's also building up our muscles and our ability to respond to unpredictable events. I mean, I feel better now than I did 3 months ago because I know that I've got 50 other people in my indivisible group, for example, who are all doers, who are already organized, who already have figured out how to put on a giant event. Who knew that we could do that, right? So we've learned how to do some things together. And I think you and I, in all our years of studying internet-based activism, that one of the things that we noticed is that very often a lot of these collaborative projects they don't come from nowhere. They come from people knowing each other already, right? Like I can think all the way back to one of the very first civic tech projects, which was it was after the tsunami that hit, I think it was Indonesia. There was this effort led by Ethan Zuckerman and Andy Carvin and some other folks to figure out how to collect all the information on missing and found people. Because all that information surfacing in different places, and they thought if we could just aggregate the names, it would make it a lot easier for people to find each other, right?
Mhm.
Critical, and I think they called it the Finder Project. And back then, all they had was blog software. We didn't have anything else. This is like 2003 or something. But what they also had was a few people who knew how to do things with the web, who knew each other. And then they did that project. And then I think it was a year later that the hurricane hit Katrina, right? Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And this time, the same group of people were ready to spring into action because they had already taught themselves how to do this.
Right.
And they also knew how hard it was going to be. And they also knew how to bring in other people, right? And so every time that people sort of get together and learn how to do some new thing, they are also building capacity to do it better the following time.
Yeah, and on that example,
standing on those shoulders, if you will.
right, and following on those examples, now it's completely built into Facebook. You know, people identifying I'm safe, and
that's
they
right.
even
And
have,
that's an amazing thing, right? And we shouldn't forget that some of these capacities were like that's a completely new kind of public capacity or civic
totally
capability, right? That on Facebook they will automatically, generate, if there's a disaster or some kind of terrorist incident in a city, they'll almost do that automatically now.
right.
And there's a benefit to that helps keep people from panicking more than maybe they should if they can quickly find out that kind of information.
So from your perch, you say that one of the big challenges here is that there are these unexpected disruptions that can happen, and you've been looking at and involved in the creation of a lot of civic tech. Is there any gap in what's available, what we can do that we might need given some of these issues that you can see?
Yeah, I would say there's one very big gap, one very, very big gap. Though I do see people who are working on solving pieces of it. The big gap is that we really don't have simple, good tools to use to help groups coordinate with each other. That the primary tools that most people have are email, Facebook. Those are the ones that have permeated to the point where they're as easy to use maybe as like picking up the telephone and making a phone call, right?
Right.
And those things don't lend themselves all that well, for example, to making decisions. Like one of the things that groups need to do in order to operate is make decisions. And the only sort of obvious tool we have for making decisions is voting. And it's a very blunt instrument. And frankly, most people don't like to use voting. If you're in a relatively small group, you'd rather use some kind of consensus or just talk until it's obvious what the decision is. That works if you're sitting in a circle with 30 people. But what if you're on an email list with 30 people? Can you make a decision that way? And the answer is, God help us, right? Nobody would want to do that voluntarily. And so tools that make it really easy to solve those kinds of problems of group coordination. That we really, it's surprising that we're still kind of in the Stone Age. We have a few. I mean, there's, for example, Slack is a tool that was developed to basically try to address the problem that people get too many emails when they're working on teams. That if you work in a business and you're maybe on a couple of different teams and you need to be in constant contact with a few people, but you don't want to have like long email threads that lots of people. It just sucks time away from people just trying to keep up with. So this is a tool that was developed to service the needs of teams. It turns out that it's not only good in business, it can also be really useful for people working on political campaigns. And I think we're also seeing it used a ton right now by all these new groups that people are forming and joining as the place where the people who are like most engaged on a daily basis need to coordinate with each other. by itself, it's not, it doesn't quite get you all the way there, because you still need people who know kind of how to orchestrate the conversation to make it productive. That left to our own devices, we humans are pretty bad at efficiently coordinating ourselves when we're not face to face. Actually, face to face, we've learned a lot of good ways to like rapidly, like, you know, if you need to get 50 people in a room into sort themselves into 5 groups, they'll tell them very quickly, and in 2 seconds it'll be done. But if you try to do that online, it can take a lot longer. Again, because we don't have the right kinds of tools.
Right.
And so one answer is to say, don't try and use, technology for something that face-to-face meetings is better at, which I think is true. But a lot of us are not able to get to meetings. We're busy. We have children. We're homebound for whatever reason. Why should those people be excluded? So I would say that the big place to be looking for improvement is the tools that enable groups to work internally together to coordinate and make decisions well. Second one, which I think in a moment where there's so much public participation in the sort of formal processes of public meetings, these town hall meetings that all the members of Congress are having, that kind of thing. I think the other thing that's missing there is, wouldn't it be nice if public meetings were better run, if they were more engaging, if there was a way to involve more people in the room than just the ones who stand online to make a speech. Again, we're sitting at these meetings, almost all of us have computers in our pockets that have more power inherent in them than the computer that went with the astronauts to the moon. And yet most of us, when we go to public meetings, we're using phones maybe to take pictures or to share comments or to tweet, but we're not using them to listen to each other in the room.
Right.
And why not? Why don't we attempt to create some kind of a higher level of collective intelligence so that when we do meet together, we don't have to have these spectacles of people yelling and people, kind of yelling at each other. And instead, maybe we evolved some new systems for listening and for finding consensus when we don't agree. I mean, fundamentally, we don't agree with each other, right? That's the problem in America today, is that people are really divided. And how do you solve that, right? I mean, the first is don't make it worse, right? Don't do things that polarize even more. But the second one, I think, is that our technology may be making the problem worse. It may be accentuating the polarization, and that there are probably some things that we can do to support a little bit more attempts at getting people to listen more carefully, sit in the other person's shoes for a little while. That we can't just think that the way we're going to go forward is by hitting each other over the head, and one side beats the other side down and they get to rule for a while and the other side beats them down. That doesn't seem to be like a good model going forward.
I totally agree. I've seen some conference enabling platforms. The one that we're on right now, Shindig, allows up to the new version will allow up to 4 people on cam at a time, but people in the audience can have video or text chat with up to 5 people, simultaneously, so they can do breakout groups. I've seen a platform out of France which takes that to another level, which has a lot of it's less focused on the video interface, but more on soliciting comments and questions and consensus building tools within the audience as decisions are made in the process of the discussion. I unfortunately, I'd have to reach out to a friend to get the name of that platform, but so there are some technologies out there, but they're not being used by any stretch of the imagination. And to be honest,
not in the United States yet. Not much here. In other countries, I am seeing
right,
but not so much here.
But to some degree, I'm not sure our elected officials want that kind of coordination at their town halls. I think they'd rather have the command and control, and if it gets out of hand, they can point to it and say, see, they're unruly, because it gives them more political cover to do nothing.
That may be the current class of incumbent politicians got there the old-fashioned way. It's a system that they know and understand.
Right.
I think, though, that we're in the generational change. I do know some younger elected officials. We have one here in New York named Ben Kalos, who is on the city council, who has a background as a computer programmer. Very much a fan of open government, open data, open source. So I think that it is possible that the next generation of leadership
Right.
will be people who see their job as being community weavers and not just I'm more popular than the other guy kind of politician that we have now. I mean, there is, to some degree, as McLuhan said, the
Right.
medium is the message, right? Like, we are in the middle of a big transition from top-down media, the television age, broadcast age, into a more networked age. But we don't yet really fully networked politics or networked politicians, right? We still have a big gap. We're obviously going through a period of disruption, right? Where the old ways of communicating and coming to common understandings are broken, but we haven't really built new ones. We've got Donald Trump in because they're broken, right? And that in this period of stuff being broken, he's got a strong enough minority, right? 26% or whatever it is of the electorate that voted for him.
Right.
And that's enough, to win power in America right now. It doesn't give him that much legitimacy or popularity. And at the same time, we just saw 4, 5, 6 million people march.
Right.
An event that was largely organized by volunteers. I mean, that's I believe, the single largest number of Americans participating.
The day after the inauguration.
So, these are very unusual times.
Yeah. They certainly are, and really appreciate the work you're doing at Civic Hall and the work you've been doing leading up to this, because clearly a lot of interesting things are coming out of it. And as you say, I like the idea of providing that brainstorming opportunities that don't just end in 24 hours, because then the results are much more thoughtful and much more likely to come to fruition and work and actually get adopted. So I applaud you. Keep up the good work. Can't wait to come up and see your facilities. I should be up there at the end of next month, and maybe we can figure out a time for me to come by.
Great.
And
Great.
thank you very much for being here.
June 8th and 9th. Thanks, Alan. I just wanted to say thank you to everything you do, and put June 8th and 9th on your calendar for the next Personal Democracy Forum. Go to pdf17.com if you want more information on that.
In New York City.
That's right.
PDF2017.com.
Just PDF17.
PDF17.com. You heard it here. PDF17. Great conference to go to. I've been to several, loved them, and looking forward to go to more. Take care, Micah. Thank you for being here on the Dr. DigiPol Show.
My pleasure.
So that pretty much wraps up, and Anna says, merci. So here we are at the end of another episode of the Dr. DigiPol Show. I want to thank Micah again for coming on to, Micah Sifry, to come on, talk about Civic Hall, talk about civic tech, because it's really powerful stuff that's been going on, and we're really excited to see the stuff that's coming out of it. You can go find them online. Just Google Civic Hall. I think it's civichall.org, as well as pdf17.com for the conference. And this is really exciting stuff. And we will be back again with the Dr. DigiPol Show next Thursday. I think I've got a guest coming in who's going to talk about a local political issue gone awry with digital. And so I'm excited to hear the story. I haven't heard it yet, but he assures me it's going to be very interesting. So we'll see you next week on the Dr. DigiPol Show. And as always, as always, we head out with a little head bopping, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.